Hello and welcome to Improving Equity Through Targeted Distribution, using the Community Need Index and the data beneath it to measure and improve equity outcomes. Uh, Thank you for watching. This is a re-recording, so if you attended and it seems a little bit different, that is because it is. It didn't record, so we're doing it again. That said, I'm going to begin. So who am I? I am Sean Hudson. I'm the Director of Data and Analytics at Food Rescue Hero. In 2020, I graduated with my MPA from Pitts and started here in 2021, almost 5 years ago. In mid-October, I will hit my 5 years. A little more about me. I sword fight, as seen in that little GIF over there, and have four pets. Three of them pictured in the one, and then Blair, who is a perfect angel in every way, but will not ever be photographed with another animal. What are we going to talk about today? Equity. Equity is an intentional choice, a pattern we can measure. So when I talk about equity, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. I mean directing relatively more food to what we think are the highest need communities. And we want to do this deliberately. And this data lets us actually see how that's happening. And every index and system we build helps encode those choices. So it's important that we understand them. A little plug before we get into the meat of the presentation. Some of you have probably already seen this, but we just launched a new feature, the Community Need Index. If you are a Food Rescue Hero partner, you have probably been able to go into the donor and recipient maps and seen our choropleth maps that show what that need looks like, but also it exists in our suggested nonprofit system, which I am going to show a little bit later. And to date, we are the only platform that has a system quite like this. And I'm really excited to talk to you about it today. Little housekeeping, what we're going to do today. I'm going to define equity a little bit more in depth than I just did. I'm going to talk about the Community Need Index, so how we estimate need at the census tract level. Outcomes and how we measure them. So share food region high need places over time. It's going to be a big one. Other possible ways to do it. Doing it responsibly. So there's going to be some pitfalls anytime you use data to make decisions. And I'm going to talk a little about them, how to avoid them, just how to be aware of how the decisions you make can have consequences you might not expect if you don't think them through. Also, not everyone watching is necessarily going to be a Food Rescue Hero partner. So I'm going to talk about how to bring this type of analysis to your organization as well, so that everyone will walk away with something. So we think of food insecurity as a resource allocation problem. The food exists and the need exists, so how do we get it to places? I don't think I need to tell you guys how we all tend to do this. It is mostly food recovery organizations who will watch and attend these, but our retailers have surplus food. They tell us that they need food. We have a signal, so data tells us where need is. We match ideally to places in those higher need areas, and as we do that, we will have better equity outcomes. So we send food to places that are best suited or would best utilize the food. So what is the Community Need Index? I'm going to probably say CNI just for the sake of time from here on, but it is a composite score that we created at the US Census tract level. That is one of the smaller geographies that the census has. It goes block, group, tract. So the data exists at the tract level, and it reflects for us food insecurity related need. It is made of a number of factors that I will talk about, but the idea is that the distribution is going to be prioritized systematically towards need instead of a first come first serve basis, right? So we call it a composite score. That is because there are four main indicators that plus a food access adjustment. So it combines those things and creates a single score. It is geographic. It is at the tract geometry. So if you look at a map, if you look at, a lot of times you'll see county and state maps, obviously. Think of this as a much smaller level, and those tracts can be color-coded. They have underlying data that is actionable, right? So it kind of ranks our rescues where they can create the most equity, where they can be the most useful. And for us, it is shared. Everyone who has a Food Rescue Hero license has access to the CNI. We have features that are using it now, and we have features planned for the future that will use that. With that said, I'm going to talk a little bit about it further and later, but if you are not, if you are interested in the CNI, but not necessarily a Food Rescue Hero partner, do not fret. We would still love to work with you. So I will talk a little bit more about that later. The whole idea of this being, especially when I'm going to talk about our suggested nonprofits, is that it isn't about who reaches out to us first or who we can get a hold of most easily, but we are going to try to send food where we think it is the most needed. And that isn't just based on our subjective assessment. It is going to be based, at least in part, on data. So what does the index measure? There are 4 primary indicators and a food access adjustment. So there is SNAP participation, the prevalence of type 2 diabetes, disability status, and a localized median income. When I say localized, I mean it becomes this relative measure relative to other tracts around it. And what that allows us to do is use that median income as a score across the entire country where it's still usable, right? In addition to that, we also use the Food Access Research Atlas. It has been recently updated. They have a slightly different name now. I think they are mostly now using the SRAM, SNAP Retailer Access Map. It is different how it works now, so there are going to be some adjustments in the future, but there have been recent changes to the data that have changed the definitions a bit in meaningful ways. So we aren't going to get into that right now, depending on when you're watching this. But at the moment, we are using at the time that we made this, the most recent version of the Food Access Research Atlas. So that'll be the 2019 version. What does it do? We transform those scores and then sum them across. So we rank and sum them in an ordinal category based on those things. That will give us a score anywhere between 4 and 40, and then we adjust for access. That is the last piece. So if a place is considered low access, that is to say that if there is not a qualifying retailer within 1 mile in an urban setting or 10 miles in a rural setting, it is considered low access. And low income, which is a measure that they use that is relative to the number of people at or below the poverty level, federal poverty level at a certain point. But if it is not considered low access, it gets a score of 0. If it is low access but not low income, it gets a score of 2. If it is combined low access, low income, it gets a score of 4. So there's an adjustment. So the CNI is those 4 deciles ranked and summed with a food access adjustment. Note on validity. The CNI has been validated against food insecurity data from the CDC. That does exist in the CDC Places dataset, but it just is more sparse. It isn't available everywhere. Not every place participates, but where it does exist, this score has a very strong and positive relationship. So where the CNI is high, the food insecurity also tends to be high, and that works really precisely, and it's statistically strong relationship. So what do we do with that, right? Before we talk about where we actually send the food, we can make a map. It's not hard to do. Darker green in this instance means a higher CNI, which means for us, assumed higher need. Anyone kind of from the Pittsburgh area won't be super surprised by this if they know a little bit about your Allegheny County geography. No one is ever surprised when they see the scores that we've talked to. These areas that are considered higher need do appear to have higher need. We've talked to our dispatch teams about this, and we have been heartened by how it tends to track with people's understanding of the need in their city. So what we do see here is very importantly, it isn't evenly spread, right? That is interesting, and it is important because we are trying to make resource allocation decisions. And when we have a finite number of resources to allocate, we want to have some order and priority to put those on. So the idea is this surface is the layer of our routing decisions, or part of it. How do we target distribution? It helps us prioritize our partners. So there's a few ways you can do this. Before you even send a rescue anywhere, you can prioritize your partner recruitment. You can find these high need CNI tracks and find nonprofit partners, places that might be able to receive food in those tracts. That would be a good place to prioritize those efforts. Obviously, when we have people who manage the relationships with nonprofits, we ourselves are a nonprofit. Everyone wears a million hats. There's only so much time to do that, and those help us make decisions on where we ought to find partners. A big part of what we're doing now and what we are seeing a lot of positive impact on is it helps us route our rescues. So when we get a rescue that comes through, it can almost always go to a lot of places. We have a lot of nonprofit partners, but the CNI helps us prioritize that need. And again, I'm going to show you exactly how we do that and how you might be able to think about those things too. Additionally, it'll help us spot gaps, right? So high CNI tracks without nearby partners look like good places to, again, do the first part, right? Find those expansion targets. If we see that food isn't going to a high need place, maybe we can find a way to make the food go to that high need place. And it helps us balance the network a little bit, right? So is the volume flowing to the need instead of just convenient locations? We have a very capable dispatch team, and they have a lot of knowledge in their head. There's a lot of mental overhead, especially when we get new ones. So sometimes when you just need to place a rescue, it could be very easy to just send the food to the place that you know is going to pick up the phone. That's why we came up with the suggested nonprofits system in the first place, to help take off some of that mental load where they have to think about where to send it. This helps add another layer to that where we are geographically aware of potential need in those areas, and now we can suggest those places based on that. So what does that mean? Equity is built right into the suggestion engine. When we get one, our platform suggests several places, and that need in part is weighted on that ranking. So generally speaking, we will always lean towards better equity whenever possible. So we get a rescue, we rank our candidates. CNI is one of the 3 factors. And then those top suggestions leaning towards that higher need over time will mean better equity overall. When I say there's 3 factors, the CNI is part of it. Route distance, so how far a volunteer will have to drive after picking up the food and dropping it off. And then also the recency, so places with less recent rescues or no rescues at all should rank a little bit higher, because we want to send food to more places. We want the rescues to be convenient, so we don't want the volunteer to have to drive very far, but we also want the food to go to places that need it the most when there's only so much food. So need is a deliberate third of every suggestion, and ideally that will help shift our food towards even better equity outcomes, even though we've already, I think, had pretty good outcomes in general. This is just a little screenshot. I'm actually going to show you exactly what this looks like. But again, just a little piece of what that will look like. I'm actually probably going to show you exactly this rescue in just a moment. I'm going to share here. I've seen. Perfect. Okay, I've started making a rescue here. As you can see, I just picked a first location. It is going to be that same giant eagle. They are excellent donors. Worked with us for a long time. Threw in some produce here. The actual item doesn't matter a lot for this, but everything goes into the criteria. I'm just showing you what, for the selection of elimination, for elimination purposes, everything goes in, but what we get when we weigh those factors is suggesting this location first. So we got a housing authority over here. And as you can see, It got food relatively recently, but it is quite close at just a little over a mile, but it is in the higher need. So this is, at 36 of a possible 44. That's in the top 20-ish% for our organization. And after weighing all those factors, this is the first suggestion. You can also see that this one comes up. It is considerably farther, but there we go. It is a good bit farther. However, it is in a very high need area with a SNAP participation rate of 30%, very high diabetes rate, very high disability rate, and it is considered low food access, right? So this is getting almost the maximum score, high at 42. So that you'll also see that other places in this exact same tract are also being suggested in those top 10 even. Right? And as we zoom out a bit, you can see that these farther places and slightly lower need areas are also getting different suggestions. So these are still high, quite high actually, but they are farther, and in some cases have gotten food more recently, right? So this one says a year ago. It's still relatively high up in the suggestions because it's relatively far compared to the others, but it is in a very high need place, and it hasn't gotten food very recently. So that is, broadly speaking, how suggestions work. I'm going to switch back over. Back. Perfect. We're gonna go back to our slideshow. Yeah. And all that is to say that that is how we build the equity into our planning. And so a person is always in the loop. If you are finding that there are issues in here, or it's just better to send food elsewhere from the top several, that is fine. What you do see, though, is it will prefer places that are going to be higher need by virtue of the fact that it is now part of the decision. So I said equity a bunch of times, but what is that? What do I mean when I say that? It isn't about equal distribution. It's about relatively more food going to places that are relatively higher in need. And what we are estimating that in a lot of ways, the main way in this case being the community need index, but you can look at food insecurity data if it exists where you're at the level that you need it, and also SNAP participation, that is almost a quarter of the score, but also it's on its own a very good self-report survey of food insecurity, because there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get SNAP, so much so that a lot of people who qualify for SNAP do not participate. But if you do, then you almost certainly need it, right? It's very important. If you qualify for SNAP and you applied for it and you can get it, you really benefit from having SNAP. So equity is whether that distribution, in this case, actually tracks to that need. And I did do a little bit of analysis of that. So after launch, the highest need quintile, that's the top fifth of CNI scoring places, and also SNAP participation, both roughly doubled in the number of, in the share of one-time rescues that we got. So I for this data, I took a month prior and a month post. The one on the right is our post, and the one on the left is before. So before, about 12% of all of our ad hoc one-time rescues were going to that top fifth of what we think of as need. But now it's about a quarter of them. So that is pretty good. That is a doubling of that in just that first month. And this is, of course, is just our one-time rescues, which is not our recurring rescues. Right? Those make up probably about 90% of our operation. But as we get new recurring rescues, they'll start being routed to those places, and that'll, I think, be very helpful over time, especially. Another way to look at this is weight. The reason I used rescue count was just in a relatively short period of time, a couple of big rescues can really drive the weight, which it did in this case. But as you can see in those top two quintiles, again, huge increases that the top uh, fifth of SNAP participation in this case went from about 9% of the weight to a quarter of the weight. Whereas, the one level below that, 19 to 18, but as you can see, it's a pretty big increase, and it mostly fed into the third there. But like I said, it is good that, big relative increase to those top two quintiles. But of course, the second one got a big increase that cannibalized into both the third and the first quintile. Some of that, of course, again, is just because big rescues will cause big swings, especially in a relatively short period like that. But directionally, I'm very happy to see how this is going. You can do a lot of things with this, though, other than just routing that and measuring the difference. Right here, we see a bivariate graph that also has our places that got food. So if they got more rescues, then they're bigger bubbles. And you can see the tracts getting, how much food they got relative to how much need they have. So that top right corner is the best to see. And you can see that a lot of places are in that color, which is nice. And, where you see these brighter ones, or if you see, these dark blue, obviously we would hope to see shifting away from the blue areas towards the dark green areas over time. And I'm actually going to show you a live version of that. So a more interactive map, just so you can see some of the possibilities here. If you have someone who can work in GIS or code, these are not terribly difficult maps to make. So if I zoom in, you can see a lot of these things, right? So you can see our scores, our bubbles, and if you are at all familiar with the Pittsburgh area, you can probably even point out places. But these dark green areas are ideal. So this is high need, high food, perfect. And that does make a lot of sense because these are relatively high CNIs. In fact, there are only a few from the top. So they're probably in the top 10, 15%. And this is just one example of a map that you can pretty easily make with this very same data. Excuse me. I am gonna share again. We are coming on the tail end here. So thank you for sticking with me as I juggle the share screen. Slideshow. There it is, great. Anyway, it's two variables. The darkest tracks high need high food. Yeah, the green ones, especially in that bottom right corner, tell us where the best gaps to target are, right? So that's what the advantage of a bivariate graph like this. So this area near the southern end of Allegheny County is probably good. All right, you see a very dark one, but near it you see a couple of lighter green. So despite the fact that the need is fairly high, they could stand to get more food. A lot of times when I'll talk about metrics, people will say, what is a good score? And there isn't really an answer to that. And the reason for that is what we care about is change over time. There isn't a best distribution metric, right? X% of your food doesn't have to go to the top quintile of your recipients. You should just try to improve that trend over time, right? So it's a baseline. It is a starting line, not a scorecard. And no one point in time measurement can really tell you anything about your operation other than what happened then. So what do? You want to, as we talk about these metrics that I'm going to talk about specifically, you're going to want to talk about the trend, not the number. You're going to hold the method constant. And you're going to want to be careful when windows are short, right? So, that initial one I showed you was only 1 month in either direction. And that is significant. So that isn't very long. We saw that that was important for that baseline number, right? And the weight shifted pretty dramatically because of relatively few rescues. So when you are evaluating your program, you're probably going to want to look at least monthly, probably quarterly, or even year over year, though. There we go. So here's just a few examples of summary numbers that you can track each quarter. This is not the best or the only way to do it. It's just a way to do it. So I have a concentration index here, pretty useful. How concentrated is the distribution towards higher need? Anything above 0 is good. 1 would kind of indicate a perfectly spread in only the highest need areas. And anything below 0 would indicate that you're probably sending more food to less need, at least according to SNAP or CNI, right? In this particular case. In this case, you could use it as a single trend line that you can look at quarter over quarter, right? So if that number is going up, that's great. After you have some data collected, if it's going, even if it goes down a little bit, that's not necessarily a problem, especially if it's kind of within seasonal expectations. Don't panic if the good number goes down. Everything just needs its context, right? We also looked at equity ratio. These are real numbers, by the way. So that is food per household in the highest need tracts versus the average area. So in this case, it's almost very close to double, 1.7 times in the highest need areas relative to average, which is great. That is a good equity ratio. That means that food tends to be concentrating in higher areas. There is some chicken and egg to this. Places that receive food, unsurprisingly, are in places that might have higher need. Another one that you can look at, especially if you have a well-defined service area, is the coverage of high need. So the share of your highest need tracts with an active recipient partner in this case, right? So in this case, the highest need chunk of tracts in Allegheny County there's 89 of them in total. We have at least one partner in 26 of them. So we have a 29% coverage. Therefore, 63 potential good expansion gaps to look at. And each of these can be computed against any yardstick. In this case, I used mostly SNAP. CNI works as well, obviously, but you can use any proxy for the outcomes that you care about. In our case, if you have good food insecurity data, you should use that. Another little special consideration is that not every site serves its neighborhood, right? So I think of 3 particular types of organizations here. You've got your shelters. People come from everywhere to stay there, and everyone who is there needs to be there. So shelters could independently be treated as very high need, regardless of what their neighborhood looks like, right? They don't specifically serve neighborhood. Home delivery and Meals on Wheels programs, those generally we are bringing food to a hub that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with its distribution other than its centrality. So they will send food relatively close to where they are, but they are not explicitly serving just the census tract that they're in, the census tract or the zip code, or even necessarily the county, right? So that's a thing to think about. And then obviously, schools and other big regional hubs. Schools are often, especially school programs, they're often recipients, and they can be located in relatively high or relatively low need areas. And that is just a thing to keep in mind because regardless, it is kids and they are coming from all around and they might need things regardless of the exact neighborhood that they are in. Also, measurement feeds back into better targeting. So we rank community need, we distribute according to that need, and then we measure what happens, right? So did we improve our share to that need? After we go through a cycle of that, we refine it. If we need to change our measurement, that is totally fine. Make sure you kind of back test that. Just make sure that you can test the same thing with prior data. You don't want to change the yardstick every single time, and you want to be measuring the same thing against the same thing. So just be aware of that. After you may find that a certain score just isn't serving you well, refine it, work on it, and then just start again. Score, distribute, measure, refine. Other things to think about. Be very aware of the type of geography that you're using. Often people will ask me specifically about zip codes. So those are large postal constructs, and those can really blur high and low need geographic areas. They do not map cleanly to census data. And even like the zip code tabulation area is itself estimated. It isn't even necessarily all that zip code. And it is not created to be as statistically homogeneous as your blocks, block groups, and tracts. So it is not as helpful. You want to be careful with zip codes. So the median income of a zip code could not tell you the whole story, for example. Public data always lags. So most of my things in here are based on census 5-year estimates, which means the data is probably around 2 years old at any given time. And it's very precise. It is the best stuff out there outside of a straight up decennial census, but that only happens every 10 years. So being aware that these food access classifications are updating on a delay, and you need to know that data might not perfectly reflect the reality on the ground right now, especially, and this is important, that there is not a way to use this public data in the event of, say, an emergency, right? You don't want to necessarily use the community need index to respond to a disaster. What you want to respond to is the disaster, right? So you might be able to use that for prioritization, but really in those situations, what you should respond to is the underlying reality that people know is happening. Indicators and code choices. This is the most important thing. So what you pick is a values decision. There's no wrong pick, right? You need to pick something to evaluate what you're doing against, but what you do pick could obscure other things. So you want to say what it is, make it explicit, make it revisitable. You might find that SNAP participation is just not that helpful, right? You may find that even though a place is hot, relatively low need, SNAP participation is low, median income is high, all that. That doesn't mean that the people there, that goes right into the next one, community voice, the people in these communities that are considered lower need aren't necessarily low need, right? So we need to validate against what our residents, our partners, and your teams know about the places that they work in. Keep a person in the loop all the time. How can you analyze your own equity? Like I said, find an indicator. I talked about SNAP participation a lot. Obviously, community need index, it is built right into it. But if you build your own score, you can do that. Find that indicator. Find a baseline. So what are you doing now? How much food is going to, the top 10%, 20% of SNAP participation? Change your habits, and then look at that in next quarter, next year, and see if that number is improving. So track the distribution against that indicator. And you do that year over year. Keep doing it. Like I said, if you need to, you can absolutely change how you're measuring things. Just be aware that you need to apply that same measurement to your old data as well. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to know. Also, my favorite recommendation is to let us help you. Obviously, everyone here cares about this stuff. Many people watching this are our Food Rescue Hero partners, and they all have access to this currently. They are using it. They are using the CNI to help route food. It is part of suggested nonprofits. They can see these maps. But even if you aren't a partner, we can probably help you. So you can email us, myself or Sedona. Her name is right there. Our emails are very easy. It is our first name, so mine, SEAN, or Sedona, at foodrescuehero.org. We will absolutely be happy to talk to you about how, like, maybe you could use the CNI itself to evaluate your own routing decisions. And with that said, equity is a decision you can measure. This is just one way to do it, but it makes serve those who need it most a systematic and repeatable process. No one has to think about how to do it because it is baked into partly how we make rescues now. This approach can work anywhere though. Pick something you trust, steer food towards it, and then see if it is working, right? With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you got something out of this. Like I said, email me if you have any questions, email Sedona if you're interested in anything we talked about here. I am happy to talk to any of you. Thanks.